Yes, good morning, everybody. Today we are going to talk about DFT. So this will be an introductory lecture to DFT. So DFT, as we all understand, this is designed for testability. It was introduced around 1970, wherein testing was integrated with the design process. As the level of integration increased and the chip complexity it increased through all the years, it became impractical that a person, design engineer, is designing a chip and it is being passed to another person who's a test engineer that he performs the test. So without any connection, it was becoming impractical to design to test high complexity circuits. So this necessitated that there is a need of including testing capabilities along with the design process also only. So this was the basis of DFT. So obviously it helped save a lot of time and efforts because designing now it is, testing now it is part of the design process itself. Okay, so the way the design is going to be verified, the extra logic which we have included, that also becomes part of the complete design. Okay, so that is the basis of the design process. So we'll just consider one example. Consider n-bit counter. Okay, n can be 64. For example, the 64. Okay, now if we want to test MSB, so you can see that how many cycles we'll have to go through. We need to run at least at 2 raised to power n minus 1 times, okay, before we can test the MSB. Okay, so this becomes very difficult to proceed with the test. So first of all, uh, DFT, it is assisted by SWAPE analysis. The ones we did, the testability measures, they are very important because testability measures, they tell me how difficult it is to control or observe the node. Okay. Once we have an idea that, okay, these points in my circuit, they are difficult to control or they are difficult to observe, then I can change or that then I can include by extra hardware or extra test pins, exclusive test pins to control or observe that particular node, which is giving me a very high testability measure. So DFT, definitely we know it requires extra logic, okay, and it is assisted by SWAPE analysis. So SWAPE analysis is an integral process of DFT. How, how, how we have to include that extra hardware, that is a decision taken on the basis of SWAPE analysis testability measures. Okay, I hope this is clear. So then we come to the techniques. Broadly, we are going to classify the DFT techniques. First of all, they are the ad hoc techniques, which the name implies are very temporary in nature. Then we have the scan-based structure techniques. They include the scan-based techniques. Okay, the ones you must have heard over the time, like partial scan, full scan, this random access scan, or LLST, that is level sensitive scan design. So this is the most common. Structured techniques are the most common. Then we have BIST. BIST is integration of testing plus observability in the hardware itself. So you as a design engineer are not necessarily required to observe that. Observation is also included or integrated along with the testing procedure, and it is carried out at the circuit level itself or the chip level itself. Okay. So that is BIST. And then we have boundary scan. Now boundary scan, we could have included it in the structured ones, but I'm taking it separately because that was a separate hardware very points which had to be defined for testing a manufactured chip up on a board. So a tap controller was provided. So it was a different standard, IEEE standard altogether, and it is defined as IEEE 1149.1. So that is our boundary scan. So broadly, I can classify my DFT techniques into these four methodologies, and then I am going to start with each one of this. Now coming to ad hoc DFT. Ad hoc, as the name suggests, this is temporary in nature. So I can make a local modification to the particular point which I see. Ki, okay, this node is not observable in my circuit. So to make that node observable, I can include, let's say, I can include a multiplexer, I can insert a test point, and I can control that particular node. So it is concerned with a local modification to the a part of the circuit. It is not systematic or methodological. Okay, so it is going to be, so it is not methodological. Okay, so it is only based on experience where I can say, okay, the good practices to be followed for a design to be testable is this. So I'm just going to define a set of good practices. So that is what ad hoc DFT is. We'll just take one example. For example, there is an internal node which I want to control. Okay, so I can take help of this multiplexer. So I am inserting a multiplexer through which I'm passing the normal data which was going to that particular node. Along with that, I am actually passing the test input. Okay, so that is going to help me control this node. Okay, and there is the test mode selection. So what I have done, I have included the extra hardware, a multiplexer, to control a particular node. Similarly, I can do it to observe a particular node also. Okay, so this is one method, one example of what ad hoc DFT is. The common practices what are used are, for ad hoc are, we normally go in for partitioning the design into the functional blocks. Functional blocks, when I say, it means which can be categorized according to the function they are doing. Let's say one is going to go for the address decoding part, next is going for the chip selection part, so I can identify the different blocks. And when I'm partitioning, that partitioning has to be done. What is the advantage first before I go to what is the advantage? Normally, the testing, it is actually proportional to square of the number of block, square of the uh, that is partition. So if I'm partitioning, let's say if I'm having a whole big design, number of components. Okay, yes, number of components is proportional to the square of that. So if I'm dividing into four, a full chip, if I'm dividing into four partitions, so I'm actually decreasing the uh, testing burden by a factor of 16 for the complete section. Okay, each section I'm decreasing the testing burden by 1 by 16th part. Okay, by dividing it. Okay, so it eases out, it next makes my this testing problem less complex. Okay, but at the same time it requires me to see that there is no feedback between the two partitions. Okay, try to make those partitions as independent as possible. Even the clock rates can be partitioned. So if my two blocks are working on clocks, I should try that they can work on independent clocks. So partitioning, though it is a good approach, but still it may have so many overheads. Next is, I should avoid the asynchronous storage elements completely. There should be no feedback loops for the combinational logic. The redundant logic should be removed as far as possible. We should insert the local test points just as the example we saw in the last slide. That multiplexer was inserted for making a node observable. So that is insertion of local test points. Next thing is, we have to segregate digital and analog sections, because what we are talking about today is digital DFT. Similarly, we have different set of techniques which are acting for analog testing. So when I'm talking about applying my testing to my different sections, I have to differentiate between the digital and analog. At the same time, I have to avoid high fan out and fan in. What is the problem with the high fan out? Because if I'm having a high fan out or fan in, I will be having problem applying the ATPG. So I should have low fan out and fan in points. So these are the some common techniques. They may be numerous. They are learned with experience over the time. Okay. Next we come to structured approach. Structured approach, they are uh, the ones which are based on a particular methodology. Okay. So they are, as the name suggests, they have a particular model which is defining them. And based on that, the most common techniques are scan-based DFT. Okay. So what is actually a scan? To understand what is a scan technique, I will consider a simple circuit, what it means, just to understand that. So this is my simple circuit which is modeling a sequential circuit. Okay, here these are my primary inputs, primary outputs, combinational logic. Flip-flops, they constitute the sequential logic which is there, or the storage elements. This is my, this output coming from the logic. These are the pseudo primary outputs, PPO, and this is my PPI, that is pseudo primary inputs. Okay. So what happens is, this is my normal one. Okay, I assume first thing is under the scan DFT, you have to assume that all your storage elements, they are nothing but they are clocked or latched D flip-flop, transparent ones. Okay. Then we come to how under scanning we are changing. So when we are using a scan-based DFT, we are changing it. We are changing each flip-flop as controlled by a multiplexer, okay, where the input data input is coming on one line and the other input which is there, that is coming as my scan input, and that scan input is coming as the output of the previous cycle. Okay, so this is my select line which is selecting the scan mode, whether it is going to work in the normal mode or the scan mode. So this is what your scan DFT is doing. What we are doing is we are giving the scan data in and we are having an additional output to each flip-flop which is scan data out. And we are inserting an extra logic which is a multiplexer in this case to control this data in and to observe the output which is coming from the flip-flop. So when I know the output which is coming from the flip-flop, which is going as the pseudo primary input, I know what is the state. So I'm able to understand what is PPI and what is PPO by inserting this extra logic, and I'm able to control the state and observe the state of my sequential or the storage element. So this is what we understand by scan. Okay. Normally the procedure we'll see actually when we are going for the full scan or what. Normally what happens is we are going to select the scan mode. We are going to give the scan input. Once that is clocked in, we are going to change it to the normal mode. That data which has been put in, that is being passed on to the combinational logic. Combinational logic will work in the normal mode with those known inputs, known pseudo primary inputs, and it is going to give me some desired or expected or the output which is there. Okay, which I can then see whether it is correct or not. So I can keep repeating this procedure. I hope it is clear. If it is not, eventually when we'll apply, we'll definitely understand. So this is the how we are going to modify our circuit for scanning. So basically, the objective of the scan DFT is to make the internal states of the sequential elements controllable and observable. So what my target here is, I'm going to make my sequential elements, flip-flops in this case, as controllable and observable. Okay. It by default does the partitioning of the circuit because we are doing what? We are inserting the test points for sequential logic only. So we are already dividing it into sequential part which is there. Okay. So it is functionally putting it into the clock based and the combinational logic. And the problem it reduces to simply that of combinational circuit testing problem. Okay, so with this, there are these certain rules which have to be followed for DFT, scan based DFT. We have to use only clocked D-type flip-flop, or if I'm using level sensitive latch, it could be a master slave level sensitive latch for all the state variables which are to be controlled in my circuit. Okay. Next is at least one PI. This is primary input. I'm sorry, it is not PT, it is PI. One primary input should be available in the test mode. Okay. Next, the clock inputs, they have to be controlled from the PI. My clock should not be a gated clock. It should be controlled with PI, okay, by the primary input. That is, I have to synchronize my inputs with the clock, which in turn can be controlled by PIs. Okay, and next, all the storage elements, they should be synchronous, preferably synchronous. Yes, they can be asynchronous. That has to be dealt separately. So next important thing, now we understand what is the concept of scan. So before we move ahead, we need to understand two very important things. Now you have understood what is scan. Now it is revolving around two things. First thing is how I am actually designing or changing my flip-flop, which is the basic storage element. मतलब मैं उसको मैं कैसे चेंज कर रही हूँ कि मैं उसको ऑब्जर्व कर सकूं या कंट्रोल कर सकूं. So what is the model or how I am changing it? Whether I am using a multiplexer only every time, or I have a different way also to model my each element of the flip-flop. So that is called scan cell design. That is my each sequential element, how I am changing it so that I can use it or I can control it and observe it so that it becomes testable. So that is called my scan cell design. Okay. And the other important thing is scan architecture. Now, what is scan architecture? Now, once I have decided कि मैं फ्लिप फ्लॉप तो मैं फ्लिप फ्लॉप को ऑब्जर्व करने के लिए मल्टीप्लेक्सर ही यूज करूंगी. ऑन एवरी फ्लिप फ्लॉप आई एम गोइंग टू इम्प्लीमेंट वन मल्टीप्लेक्सर. सो मैं हर फ्लिप फ्लॉप के आगे एक मल्टीप्लेक्सर लगाऊंगी जिसमें से एक उसकी नॉर्मल डेटा इनपुट आएगी और दूसरी उसकी स्कैन इनपुट आएगी और उसका जो सिलेक्ट लाइन होगा मल्टीप्लेक्सर का दैट विल स्विच बिटवीन द मोड्स. So that I have decided. It means I am decided on scan cell design. But if I have, let's say, 10 flip-flops in my circuit, is it required that all the 10 flip-flops should be involved in the scan testing? Or I want to use only 2, or I want to test only 8. 2 are already at the primary output, or 2 are observable to me. So that decision, that gives me scan architecture. I hope it is clear. ठीक है, मतलब जब हमने स्कैन करने का सोच लिया, स्कैन करने का मतलब है कि मैं इंटर्न, व्हाट डू यू अंडरस्टैंड बाय स्कैन? आई कैन गो इनसाइड अ थिंग एंड आई कैन सी द थिंग्स. सो सेम थिंग, आई कैन गो इनसाइड द सर्किट. सर्किट के अंदर मेरे लिए एटीपीजी के साथ कॉम्बिनेशनल वाज वर्किंग फाइन. सर्किट कॉम्बिनेशनल सर्किट में मेरे पास बहुत एल्गोरिथम्स है जो अच्छी कवरेज दे रहे थे. सो दैट वाज सॉल्व्ड. बट व्हेन आई केम अक्रॉस सीक्वेंशियल, आई डिडंट हैव एन इफेक्टिव टेक्निक. कोई भी टेक्निक इफेक्टिव नहीं थी जो सिक्वेंशियल सर्किट्स को टेस्ट करने में, फॉल्ट डिटेक्शन में हेल्प करे, which can give me a very good optimal coverage. So I opted for DFT. मतलब मैंने एक्स्ट्रा हार्डवेयर शुरू किया जहां पे मैं अंदर जाके उस सिक्वेंशियल कंपोनेंट को ऑब्जर्व भी कर सकूं और कंट्रोल भी कर सकूं. अब वो करने के लिए व्हाट डिड आई डू? आई इंसर्टेड सम एक्स्ट्रा हार्डवेयर जिसके पिन्स मेरे पास आउटपुट पे अवेलेबल है एज अ प्राइमरी इनपुट, एज अ प्राइमरी आउटपुट, ताकि मैं देख सकूं कि अगर मैं इसको ये इनपुट दे रही हूँ तो मेरे पास क्या आउटपुट आ रही है. ठीक है. So that was the whole idea. अब the change of each sequential element, that is called the scan cell design, and how many flip-flops I want to observe or I want to involve in this test, that is scan architecture. Okay, so we understand each of these separately. So consider the scan cell design. Scan cell design, typically it can be classified as a mux scan cell, as a LSSD, that is level sensitive scan design, and a clocked scan. Okay, so based on the scan architecture, I can further classify as a full scan architecture, as a partial scan architecture, or as a random scan architecture. Okay, so I will first go and choose my scan cell design. Once I've chosen it, I will go through each of this technique: full scan, partial scan, and random access scan. So let's start with the mux scan cell. So in case of mux scan cell, what happens? Let's see. So this is what I have done. What I do is, to my every flip-flop, I am attaching a multiplexer, the same thing which I did in the previous example. Okay, so it has two inputs, a data input and a scan input. The scan input is used for the test mode, data input is used for the normalness. SE is the line which selects between the test mode and the normal mode. Okay, so this waveform is going to tell me how it is going to work. So this is edge triggered flip-flop. It is going to work on the rising edge, that is transition of 0 to 1. Okay, so let's say initially my select line is 0. When I am saying my select line is 0, it means my data input line is connected to the input of my flip-flop. So at that time my data is changing. Now let's say at this point my data is D1. So it is clocked D1 at the input, and what I am getting at the output is by data input, whatever was the data at the input D1, that is being passed to the output. After that, till the next clock comes, SE is still 0, and somewhere it changes, select line is changed to 1. So once the select line is changed to 1, it means I have already changed to the test mode, and my SI input of the multiplexer is connected to the flip-flop input. Okay, so at this time, let's say this time be T2, when it has come, what is the rising edge? What is the input of SI? It is T3. So it clocks in T3 and that is passed on to the output at Q. So this is the output. So this is the way it works. It is pretty simple. So no complications in this. But then what are the overheads? What is the cost we are paying for this simple methodology? It is, first of all, in terms of hardware, it is having more number of pins. Every flip-flop is going to have 2 additional pins and 1 at the output, which is multiplexed by the output only. Okay, so I can say 3 hardware pins are being added. Then 1 multiplexer is being added for each flip-flop. Okay, so more hardware. If hardware increases, it means more of area. If more hardware is there, more units are there, it means routing is required. So my routing overhead increases. And further, since my input is coming through the multiplexer, my delay has increased. So the overhead is quite high. I am already losing on hardware, I'm losing on area, I'm losing on my routing, I am losing on my delays. So though it is very simple, but we have to pay a penalty for that. So this led to the improvisation, which was called a clocked scan cell design. सेम चीज है जो मल्टीप्लेक्सर में करते थे, बट मल्टीप्लेक्सर में मैं क्या कर रही थी, एक मल्टीप्लेक्सर अलग से एक हार्डवेयर लगा रही थी जिसकी 2 इनपुट्स थी, या तो डेटा इनपुट या टेस्ट इनपुट. Here I am doing the same thing, But instead of using a separate multiplexer to save on my area and my pins, what I have done is I have actually implemented two clocks. एक clock पे एक input जाएगी, दूसरे clock पे दूसरी input जाएगी. Pretty simple. So I have removed that every flip-flop should be having a separate marks. That is going to give me a lot of area saving. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm using two separate clocks in this case. Okay. One is D clock, that is for data, and the other is S clock, which is for scan. So obviously, when my flip-flop is going to work at the normal mode, it is going to work on D clock. And when it is going to using this S clock, it is going to work in the test or the scan mode. So what is the advantage? Before that, we'll just see how it is working. See, in this case, what happens is when S clock is going high, it is blocking D clock. And when D clock is going high, it is blocking S clock. Okay. So there is no overlapping between the two. Only one out of the two can be active. Okay. So it can be a level sensitive. You can use it for the latch also. You can use it for the flip-flop also. We are taking the example of a flip-flop implementation, but I can use it for a level sensitive design also. So we'll start with this. So S clock, it goes high, that is there is a transition from 0 to 1. At that time what happens? My SI is going to be active. So SI के ऊपर अब उसने क्या clock करना है? What is the thing it should clock at this point? Okay, I assume that pin data line was already having. So मेरी output पे D1 आएगा because the clock, it is S clock is going to clock whatever is there on the SI line, but it is going to pass at the output whatever was stored already in the flip-flop. So you should understand this differentiation to understand this diagram. Okay. आउटपुट क्यू पे क्या आ रहा है? आउटपुट पे क्या पास होगा? क्योंकि मैं एज्यूम करती हूँ कि मेरा डेटा इनपुट ऑलरेडी था इसके अंदर क्लॉक्ड. ओके, सो जैसे एस क्लॉक आता है, जो ऑलरेडी फ्लिप फ्लॉप के अंदर है वो आउटपुट पे गया. सो वो क्या था? वो था D1. सो जो डेटा था वो चले गया. और SI पे क्या था उस टाइम? SI at that time is having T1. So T1 is clocked in. Okay. So that is, you have to understand, it is going to clock in whatever is on the data line, on the input line, and it is going to pass what is on the that. Okay, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. चलो अब हम डेटा क्लॉक को देखते हैं. जब मेरा डेटा क्लॉक यहाँ पे आता है, at this time, what is my SI? SI is actually T3. So that is directly connecting my SI to SO. So it is actually passing my T3 directly. So you understand the difference between the data passing and the scan input passing. आपकी जो Q आउटपुट है, जो आप ऑब्जर्व करोगे, जब आपका ये जब SI होता है तो वो क्लॉक करता है कुछ जो SI पे है, पास नहीं करता. पास वो होगा जो मेरे डेटा लाइन पे ऑलरेडी क्लॉक्ड था, पहले था मेरे फ्लिप फ्लॉप में. सो इट मींस इट इज टेकिंग सम इनपुट एंड व्हाटएवर वाज इनसाइड दैट इट इज throwing at the output. So when my S clock goes high, I assume that initially D1 was already inside the this flip flop. So what I'm getting at the Q output is D1, not T1. I hope this is very clear to you. और जब मेरा D clock हाई होता है तो क्या करता है? उसकी क्लॉकिंग इन तो D3 होनी चाहिए, पर वो क्या कर रहा है? SI पे जो अंदर गया है वो है T3. It is directly passing that to SO output, that is scan output. Here I think I should be T1 if I'm not wrong. Anyways, let's see. Basically you just try to understand this, that क्लॉक की जब राइज होती है, जो उसकी पर्टिकुलर इनपुट है D क्लॉक पे D1, डेटा है वो अंदर जाता है और जो पहले से फ्लिप फ्लॉप के अंदर है वो बाहर जाएगा. ओके, सो इट शुड बी क्लॉक्ड ऑन द नेक्स्ट साइकिल, नॉट ऑन द सेम साइकिल. एंड सिमिलरली इफ स्कैन क्लॉक आता है उसमें आपका डी इनपुट मतलब जो भी ऐसा इनपुट है वो क्लॉक होती है और जो भी फ्लिप फ्लॉप में पहले से था वो आउटपुट पे चली जाती है. सो क्लॉकिंग इन हैपेंस एट द rising edge, whereas passing of the data is the previous data which was there. So that is why this transition is, you have to pay attention to that. You can go through with this. If you have any problem, you can ask me. So the advantage on this is I don't have any degradation of the data. My data line is going independent of the, my clock is not getting disturbed because of the, I'm having a separate clock for serial in. So there is no change in my data input which is there. This is going independent of this, okay, on a separate clock. So this is a good advantage. Second is I have saved the area of multiplexer which was occupying. Okay, but again I have hardware ke terms mein, I have the same number of pins which are there. So that is going to take area definitely, but lower than that of the mux scan cell. And clock and clock routing overhead, that is increasing. So this is the overhead. Next we come to is level sensitive scan design. अब लेवल सेंसिटिव स्कैन डिजाइन मतलब क्या है, इसमें हम लेवल सेंसिटिव लैचेस यूज करते हैं. ओके, सो इसमें हमने दो लैचेस यूज किए हैं. एक तो ये L1 which is getting connected to my data unit on, and this is my another latch which is L2. So you can just say it is going to behave as a master slave. अगर ये राइजिंग एज पे वर्क करेगी तो ये फॉलिंग एज पे, पर मैंने इसमें क्लॉक्स डिफरेंट ही दे रखे हैं. कॉन्सेप्ट इज सेम, they are not going to work on the overlapping regions. So I have given 3 different clocks in this case, A, B and C. I is my scan input and D is my actual input. This is also called polarity hold shift register latch. Okay, how it works is, if my clock comes on C, so it means it is going to, when clock transition is coming on C, it means my data line has to be clocked in and it has to be driven on the output plus L1. Okay, so let's see what happens. So when my clock is having a rising edge transition on here, so it is level sensitive, so it is rising edge, yes, on time. So I see that it is going to, my data line is having D1. So D1 is clocked and it is passed on to my output L1. Okay. Next, my A, when clock goes high, when this goes high, what I am having at my scan input, then this input is inactive. Only I is active. So I is T3. Okay. So T3 is driven to output L1. Okay. L1 latch. Then we have this B clock. The clock B, it is going to drive the output L2. Okay. So scan input, it can go to L1 or L2. That depends upon what clock is there. If clock A is active, the output is driving L1. If input rather, and if clock B is active, it means the input is driving L2 latch. Okay, so when my B clock is coming again, it is at T3. So my T3 is actually driven to L2. So this is how it works. So the normal mode says that A should be 0 and B should be 0, and there should be a transition of 0 to 1 on this C. In the test mode, I should have C0 and AB should transit from 10 to 01. 10 means clock A is active, 01 means clock B is active. So there is a transition of 10 to 01. Now it is involving a lot of hardware. So what is the advantage of that? What improvisation we are getting in that? the best or the most biggest advantage of this is it doesn't have any hazards and races between the test input and the data input ever. That is the best thing, because we have already separated the non-overlapping clocks, and they are going to work on, all are going to work on a different combination. So we are not worried about that there is race in any input going to the output. There is no race between data input and I catching up to L1, because they are working on a different clock and the condition required is totally different. For driving L1 from the scan input, I require 1 0, whereas for data input, I require A is equal to 0. So there is no point even that I have any hazards or races introduced in my circuit. So that is one very big advantage. Second thing is, it is insensitive to component timing variation. Now, when even if you are doing STA and you are doing the skew analysis or clock balancing or clock tree synthesis, one of the most concerning point is the rise time and the fall time of the waveform. Okay, so those AC characteristics of the waveform, they are very, very important, of the clock also and of the data input also. But since it is level sensitive, each working on the different clock, we are not concerned with the rise time and fall time variations of the signals which are driving the outputs. So that is the second big advantage of level sensitive scan design. Okay, so the advantage is no races and hazards. It is stable towards AC characteristics of the circuit, and circuit once implemented, it reduces to a simple combination logic, so I can apply any ATPG algorithm there. The disadvantage is it is giving me increased design complexity and a lot of hardware cost which is there. Okay, there's no flexibility in the design. I have to include my master slave combination. It is not that I can use only edge triggered at one point or level sensitive at another point. So there is no flexibility in this design. It works well only with the synchronous designs. For asynchronous, it doesn't work well because 3 different clocks are being used. Then routing overhead for the latches, increased delay, very obvious. And the memory intensive designs, it is not preferred. We can obviously see if every cell of my memory is going to have this complex hardware involved with that. 2 latches with a master slave combination, so many pins, 3 clock pins, clock routing. I can understand what is the increase in the area and what is the increase in the number of pins and how much delay is going to be added to my memory. So that is one big drawback, but it is only that the circuits where I have to include some redundancy, okay, in my combinational circuits, I can make use of level sensitive scan design. It is very stable as compared to the other 3 designs. So it is not that it is not popular. It is also very commonly used, even as the basis of the other testing techniques also. But it depends what circuit we are going to analyze, what is its complexity, and what is our requirement out of that. Whether we are focusing on power, on area, and performance. So those criteria are very important to see what scan cell design we are using. I hope it is clear. In the next lecture tomorrow,